Hey traders, welcome to the Market Internal Review for August 21st, 2023. We're going to dive right in with SPY. Started with a dollar-wide daily gap to the upside. Immediately seeing weak tick with a potential imbalance on the market, allowing for price discovery to occur. We see that we have a bullish volume and potentially price with lagging potential 20 SMA trends on the downside. Looking at this TWAP price here, so the white dotted lines is an actual TWAP from a previous session. This happens to be from Thursday's session last week, so all the way over here from the 17th of August. Watching this engulf, we held the gap. We immediately reject, making a reversal engulf here, and then strong wick on this daily gap. Now, over here in the MIT histogram, you can see there's no bullish tick. When I see that, I tend to think that perhaps we will finally see some, and it'll be somewhat of a tick squeeze, if you will. In this case, it didn't really work out, and I think part of that is because while the index here, SPY, had a gap up, I don't know that the rest of the market really saw a whole lot of it. So it was mostly balanced. You can see we had a little bit of bull tick here, a little bit of bear tick. We did break low, but this is like medium high, and then we had just a little bit of an oscillation. Some really strong buys here though, but again, rejected Thursday's TWAP price, and we get this huge knife into the daily gap. They closed just a little bit below the midpoint, and TWAP price from Friday, that's the second deviation high price line there at 437 and change. One thing to note, when we have a session that we start and we're high above the previous TWAP range or we're below, I typically have said that I expect some kind of retracement into that range before any other kind of move can be made. I don't know why that is, but that's just how it seems to have been. So we did finally see this big knife into the daily gap. This right here with such a strong tick, Mercy itself, after even a divergence, is showing really strong New York selling. We then finally somewhat capitulate here before we hit Friday's TWAP price. To me, this whole thing here, this double rejection of Thursday's TWAP, this strong knife into the gap, was mostly a confirmation that we would see lower TWAP from Friday. Past that, hard to say, but per Friday's video, it did tell you that I wasn't buying that Friday's SPY session or the market session as a whole, where we actually mostly filled this, we did fill this gap, and we made a new high of day at the end to close out the session. I didn't really consider that any kind of reversal. We are over the 200 SMA on SPY on the daily. We are over the 100, and I have found, I don't necessarily do this kind of thing a whole lot, but I did find some monthly trends, weekly and quarterly. The quarterly is what we've broken down a handful of times this year, and we landed on the 1 week trend line that I was able to find. So perhaps we are bouncing that on the 4 hour. If you look, this 4 hour wick is essentially right on that line. Again, I'm not a huge fan of that kind of thing. I don't really see those working that much, but in this case, it appears to have a little bit of something for it. With this, clearly the direction since the peak of July, the end of July, has been mostly down. Sure, we've had some buying days. I mean, we've even had this right here, but we sold off immediately right after the fact. We saw something similar to this here. We had two really strong buys that actually broke out and made a newer high on that month, and then we gave it all back. We also did something similar here. Beginning of March, we had two strong buy days after a week of selling, only to reject and make a new low down here on this monthly trend line of 381. It's hard to believe that SPY was at 381 just in mid-March, but that's the case before we completely reversed and ripped all the way to 459, almost 460. So with that context in mind, I'm expecting more selling, and I was thinking that the probability of a TWAP touch at least was good. It's also roughly right around the mid of Friday's session trading range. So that's another kind of non-internal, but another thing that I like to keep on my charts is the previous session's high, the low, and then what's that 50%. You guys, if you've watched my channel enough, you know I love 50%. 50% of all kinds of things. The mid of the gap, 50% of the gap, mid of the trading range from previous session or even a week or month. You name it, I measure 50% of everything. But yeah, so we stopped at TWAP, and so this is a lot of confluence here, a lot of weight. When you find multiple things in alignment, that's a really strong indication that there could be something that would happen there. So watch for a reaction. All this strong bear tick here that we had, this is all making roughly the same highs or lows rather on a tick, while we're making lower lows on SPY. So it's a good time for me to take a look and see, are we going to find any kind of buy off of this? If we flip over to the other study, multi-time frame TWAP study, let's see, this here was 11:54 a.m., so almost noon. So at noon, I'm over here and I'm also looking at all the different indices. SPY itself is resting on a monthly TWAP level. So this one here, I don't know if I can click on this one here. Yeah, this one here is a whole standard deviation level. So we're sitting on that. And I'm also going to go look at IWM. So IWM was also in the similar situation. Now, the other exciting thing to note, and I gotta have some leftover notes here, but is we had a mercy squeeze signal specifically only on IWM. Right around this monthly TWAP level, we did lose it, but we also were chopping quite a lot around here, and we managed to bring it back into the first standard deviation low area. So very exciting. At that point, SPY is also doing the same thing. Trend is still in an imbalance, and I'll show you where it was at by this time. So by this time of day, almost 12, it's in the bull zone. So this is signifying that it's potentially a strong buy. It also can signal overbought, but in this case, I don't think a handful of hours from Friday would constitute an overbought scenario after a week of hard selling. So we've got all that set up here. The Vold down here and the add up here, not really giving much of a bullish sign, but given where we're at and the rest of the indices were all at relative lows, they all had key metrics that they're holding, and we got the mercy squeeze signal specifically on the Russell. Dow's at the previous day low. Qs, I think Qs was actually quite strong today. They never lost their gap, but by noon they were sitting right above it after kind of retesting. This is also where previous day high was. So even with this high divergence, they're already, you can see from a divergence standpoint, Q itself is already on an uptrend. When you see this kind of a divergence build on Mercy, it's actually telling you that whatever it is you're charting, in this case Qs, is diverged from the market. So high divergence in this case, while it's increasing in price, it just means that Qs are stronger than the market potentially. So I'm seeing this. I'm seeing Qs. There's tech giving us room to run. I haven't looked today, but I'm sure that's NVIDIA. We got kind of the same thing going with Dow. Russell, not so much, but relative to previous divergences, this would be a strong divergence for Russ. But look at this. I mean, we had a much higher divergence earlier at the open of that day. But anyway, so all of these are sitting at really good spots. If we go look at, sorry, I'm flipping around a lot. If we go look at noon, the entire New York market, the composite index here, NYSE, where is it at? It's at a monthly TWAP level. So all the indices, the entire market, ready to go. This was like the clearest buy signal for me I've ever seen. We had upside targets galore. We had early morning structure. We had this high here on the New York market. We had it. You can't really see it too well. It's kind of faint, but this is a 25% standard deviation level. That's also where we had this little bounce and retest before we went lower on the New York exchange. We got previous day high here. We have a small gap. So many things to fill. We also have TWAP itself, previous day midpoint. I mean, what more could you want for an opportunity, a buy opportunity, or flip this upside down? It's a great short opportunity. Either way, there was no way I was going to let this pass me by. This was a fantastic opportunity. The other thing is by noon, depending on how you like to structure your trades, if you're using TWAP, for example, myself, depending on what we're at, I'll buy outside of standard deviation lows if we're sitting and all the indices are clearly anchored on something. I mean, SPY itself, what's this low here? 435.32. Okay. The monthly TWAP level is 435.32. Literally, they wicked this monthly TWAP price perfection. Totally fine for me. So we come back here, and that 435.32 test is actually right here, right at 1154. So hopping in here, totally fine. You're literally buying the bottom of the market potentially for the day. Your SL could be pennies because this is the pinpoint precision that I feel, anyways, the market internals affords me. I know that if it doesn't hold here, then we're going down here or here. Potentially, we're having a complete reversal of Friday's range, and we're going to end up down here, previous day low, or maybe even something lower. So I don't want to be long much lower than, say, somewhere around here. I give myself a little bit of room. So what happens, right? We have this incredible engulf here, and just, I mean, here we go. We got 16 minutes of straight buying before we almost wick daily gap mid, come back to TWAP, and then we just keep going, right? We struggle around this TWAP level here, 437.16. We vault through here and break back on top of this other TWAP level. Okay, see that? That's really strong. I'm going to remove the gap now. Well, I guess we got a weekly gap here. So we got the weekly or the monthly. We got the session TWAP level here, 437.98. We don't quite come back below. And look at this. We just start to hug. This is my favorite, when we just start to hug the second or any of these deviation lines. We just hold right within there. Any of these, if you took this and you just started to move it around for like a 0.5, so here we start to broaden this range. We're holding the 0.5, we're holding the 0.5, holding it, right? And once we get to a certain point, boom, there's where we break it down. So good time to get out. Fantastic all day buying past noon. So if we look at MIT, once we get to this engulf, we get over TWAP. You could have waited until here. You could have waited for a long, if we break back above previous high a day. Even this little section here would have been long worthy, although by that point, look how long we've extended ourselves. We're near current high a day. The further you get away from the real entry points, I would say either here or here, the less probable you're going to be making a profit, the more inverted your risk to your reward is. So by this point, volume and price are flipping bullish. We look at the rest of this day, though, you'll notice the add and the Vold bands all day were bearish the entire day. VIX slightly broke below 17 at 1695, but this is not really that great for the next day. As far as what I'm expecting, I would expect a gap down, just with the volume and add being where they're at. We still had, a quarter of the market, roughly, of the New York market was declining, and a decent amount of volume. So, I guess I think there's already some indicators on TradingView that do this, but I kind of played around with this and I put this together just to help measure cumulative of these internals. It's a common thing I've seen on S&B Capital videos. They're really good. If you've never seen any of their content, highly recommend. It's where I've learned certain things in the early days regarding ad and tick. But they have some measures like this, and lots of people have them. There's even some built in from Thinkorswim and different platforms that have this kind of thing. But since I can code and I like to change things, I put this together. But look here around 12. Let's see, where's 12 on here? So around 12, we can already see we're starting to invert, and we crossed zero by 12:30 and started to see a buy. So when we get that, it really shows you that, yes, trend is inverted to the market. If we're coming down, it's going to become more of a buy. If we're going up, it's going to become more of a sell. But we will eventually start to buy, which will send this way. So we didn't even see that yet. And what that tells me is that there's still enough of the market in decline that even though we did start to build up some momentum on the buyer side, it wasn't even really enough to be considered a strong buy. And you'll see that with Vold. So here's Vold. We started right around midpoint balance, and we did have a little bit of an increase, but we're still below the 200. Yes, the 200 makes an impact, and we finally lose the midpoint. We retest it at around 11, and then we get that short. So right about noon, here we go. We get this really funky, and I've seen this before. I don't know what this is, but I have seen this, and it translates over to trend. Of course, trend reads this stuff. Once we get this, I notice a complete change in the structure of how it's holding that low price of the market right around here. Right here. When we hit that, that's roughly where I start to see a little bit of cooling off. Now on Vold, though, you notice on the cumulative closes, it doesn't really translate to much. We do see a little bit of cooling off here, but then we give it all back once we hit midpoint, and we did cross 200, but we hit the midpoint and come right back down towards it. So we pretty much had a cumulative overall net negative close on volume. As far as the tick goes, we didn't have, look at this here. I haven't spoke of this in a while. In the old videos, I used to speak of like the clustering kind of thing where you clump up different groups of tick because it helps you see where the big statements were made as far as the delta of the price and the market. I don't even know if I want to give it that much. It's just really, I don't try to be very speculative with this, but these are huge chunks. These are tiny, and we got these little teeny tiny wicks. I don't even really count those, and then this is just garbage at the end of the day. That happens sometimes. But even this is kind of an indicative of weakness. It's not, I mean, the price went up on the indices definitely to really good highs. I mean, SPY had a $5 buy from the low a day, but all these days were lots of selling. Look at all these selling. Look at cumulative tick. It's just selling, selling, selling. We get the buy Friday, right? It's where you see it here. And then today, right? Look at this. This doesn't look right. If we buy from low a day, I mean, here's, let's see what we say, 11:54, something like that, noon. We'll just say noon, right? Tick is still, it is trying, but it never really breaks out of 500, save for a couple times. And yes, we do see an uptrend finally in cumulative tick, but we never cross zero. Same thing for the odd. We close below zero. Close below zero. We did cross the 200, but not as strong. SPY went from the low a day to $5 up, made a new high a day, and this is the best we saw out of the New York market. Very suspect to me. I'm going to be expecting some kind of gap shenanigans by the time tomorrow opens, and not to the upside. If we see that, then honestly, what I'm going to speculate is that it's probably, sadly, a bunch of basically attracting a bunch of dumb money to buy in before Jerome Powell's coming out. Oh my gosh, there's a couple of other Fed-based events. I think there's a handful of speakers tomorrow. I shared it on Friday's video of what to expect, but yeah, there's tons of stuff. Nvidia earnings. It's going to be a crazy week. I just don't see how it couldn't be. Today was crazy. This is a Monday, for crying out loud. And SPY moved $5 from low a day and reversed Friday's range. Just, it's so odd. That's not a typical Monday. It's just not. And the fact that somehow SPY was able to move up, but add the entire New York market was still from the high or from the open, where we had 178 at the highest, 500, almost 600 stocks in advancement. We finished negative 600 in decline, 600 in decline from 600 in advance, out of the entire 2,000 plus stocks. That doesn't add up. Pardon the pun. But anyways, VIX was mostly in a downtrend. We opened at 18. Of course, they open a little early, so 3:30 Eastern. We were almost 19 at the peak of Friday before open. We did sell off all day. We made a high when we were at lows on SPY. We made a high of 18 to finish out the day after making a low of 17. It looks like after hours, because it's open for another 15 minutes, we did spike back up to 17. So that's a little interesting. What's VIX trying to tell us here? Maybe some put buyers. Heading back over to multi-time frame TWAP. Notice right where we reject on SPY. So we reject first standard deviation low on the monthly TWAP. Friday, we opened up essentially at third deviation low on the monthly. We struggled to hit seven. We struggled to hit second standard deviation low on the monthly. We reject it once and then twice, because Friday, or midday Friday rather, we reject it, hit TWAP. We do break in and close above and hit this major TWAP level from the month and come back down. So today we basically spent all of our time buying up the second deviation low of monthly TWAP just to reject the first standard deviation low. If by some miracle we continue upside, I've got some monthly levels from just basic candle structure on the monthly time frame. This level has been pretty key. 446 TWAP levels. We've got the TWAP from monthly itself is around 445 still. We did drag it down a little bit. what, 30 cents, 29 cents it looks like. We've got 443, 442, 440, blah blah blah. We got all these levels here. If if we can close in the first standard deviation low on monthly and start to take out some of these previous highs, some of these TWAP levels, like, I don't know, maybe I'll be a believer, but until we really cross back above 50 SMA on the daily, I'm not really buying that this is any kind of a reversal yet. I mean, I'm playing the days. I'm letting the days play out as they do, and I will trade whatever the data shows intraday. But proof's in the pudding, I suppose. I want to see more if we're gonna have more upside. So going into tomorrow, I'm just gonna expect potentially a gap down to start the day. If we do have a gap down, I would not be surprised if they bring us back here, just because of how strong this was without really much retracement of any kind. So 437, 436 range. See if we bring it back down there at all to start out. Then what would be key is Friday. Still, I think would be key is Friday's first standard deviation TWAP range, and then certainly we'll have work to do with today's first standard deviation TWAP range. So it's a higher or a wider deviation to 287 versus this one was a lot tighter, 160 something. So about a $1.20 difference. So half of that is actually the deviation 146. So that's pretty large. So it's going to allow for a lot of exploration of range. If we continue to see trend imbalance, I would expect to see more like this. The one thing I will say is interesting in summary of SPY's price action today is how quote unquote how fuzzy some of this is. Right now, it's a lower VIX environment ish. We're starting to trend up a little bit, but you see the sells and how every hard knife, even like if you added these three candles into one knife, what do? We kind of fuzzy. We got wicks everywhere, and then another knife, and then what do we do? For a good what is that? Almost half an hour. We wick around, and then again you add these together to kind of form one big one like this, and then what do? More wicks. Then we wick again. Then we get a big candle. What do? We do buy up, but I still kind of in my mind I formed just one big candle out of this, if you will. If that's just one big buy candle, then what do? More wicking, right? And we just continue to kind of wick up the rest of the day. This is not a strong buy. This is a melt up. Even though we bought all this is not strong buyers. This looks like this looks like the Fed is pumping in some liquidity. I hate using that word because I feel like it's overused today. But so that's kind of my summary for that. I did not look at Nvidia today. Oh my goodness. Okay, I think I see what I think I see where SPY's price came from. Dude, no way. Nvidia had another $30 day. 6%? My goodness. All right. Well, there you go. What are some of the other names doing? Wow. Microsoft had a pretty good day. $5. That's not terribly unusual for them. But look at that hold a previous high a day. That would have been great, especially when that long came in from the rest of the market. That was, at least to me, quite obvious. And then, oh, man, crazy. Stopped right on first standard deviation high. Apple Little weaker, retraced all the way to Friday's TWAP before finally seeing that strong buy. They basically did exactly what SPY did. Qs, Qs from a monthly TWAP standpoint, okay. They actually rejected first standard deviation low on monthly TWAP, hit their gap, and look at that. They actually broke into and closed the first standard deviation on the month. Now it's a pretty wide range in comparison to SPY. Let's see, it's a $6 roughly. Yeah, that's probably about the same. So one thing I was thinking this weekend, yeah, it's 5:30 on SPY. One thing I was thinking this weekend is from a just basic structure standpoint, the beginning of this month, we're 21 days in. It's a study that I have discussed before. So if this is the start of the month, we'll get rid of that. That's roughly our open. Crazy. All right, we've fallen at the lows $23, almost $24. So the question you got to ask yourself is at some point the low must be formed on the month, the high must be formed, the open, you got the open, right? Open, high, low, close. So where's the open at? Obviously it's here. Where's the high at? What's the probability we'll make a new high with very little time left on this week or on this month, right? Not we don't have much more time. What's the probability this is the low? Unsure. It could be based off of TWAP that we're only going to have that test down here from the standard deviation, the third one, the low here from last week on Thursday. I could definitely see us making a case for still coming up here before we head back lower. I could also see us heading back up here and then finishing out somewhere around monthly TWAP, not making a new low, certainly not making a new high, but just finishing out somewhere around here. I think the 450 to 439 range, while it is wide, 450 still is $7 away from the open of this month. So that would still be quote unquote bearish with a slight bounce. And even if we did get up to the 450, okay, 450 is actually where the 50 SMA is. It's a little bit above that actually, so yeah, that might be a stretch. But something to consider is just where could we go from here on a monthly candle standpoint? Do we think the low is in for the month? I think this week's structure will be key in determining that for the rest of the month. If we buy up in the first standard deviation low on monthly here, we stick around 445 to 440 for a couple days, and then maybe we close back down here. Then maybe we spend the rest of the month heading back up, but closing below some of the more important structure. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I guess very fast volume speaking. I need to shrink this a little bit, I suppose. So finance saw another decent volume day, 32 million, and 15 million in energy. I haven't really paid attention to any banking. Whoa, man. Yeah, banks are still continuing their decline. JPM saw a little bit of a bounce last week, Friday, but then Doji today. Bank of America, same kind of thing, but definitely more bearish than some of the other ones. Let's look at Wells Fargo. Similar, a little bit of a bounce, but still at low. This low pivot here of what 42.3. XLF as a whole. Let's just go look at it. So could be some opportunities depending on what happens with the Fed after all of the discussions this week. Like I said, I'm going to be expecting a gap tomorrow. We'll see if that manifests. And other than that, I hope you were able to glean some things out of this market internal review. Please, as I mentioned in Friday's video, if you're interested in a potential Discord community to talk about internals, building out indicators, new ideas with data analysis, statistics, probability for different kinds of strategies, that would be mostly the main focus there. Certainly, I'm I'm not a financial advisor, not a professional by any means, so there's no alerting service. There's nothing like that at all there, nothing to buy. But it would just be a place for like-minded groups to share ideas regarding everything I discuss here, and anything new also could be good. So if you're interested in that, leave me a comment or hit me up on Twitter. Um, but yeah, hope you had a great day today. Appreciate you watching these videos, and as always, happy trading.